And one of the reasons there's no confidence, and we mentioned it earlier, is about the uncertainty. Nobody really knows what's going to happen, and that's what you hear from the businesses, that they're sitting on cash. Banks are sitting on cash because they don't know what's going to happen. That there's just, whether it's a rule or a regulation, or whether it's a new law, or whether it's this economy that just cannot get itself going. There's just so much uncertainty. A lot of businesses talk about not hiring because they're afraid they'll pass that threshold and then have to pay their employees health care, and how is the health care law going to affect them? So at this time, there's just like this uncertainty swirling around, and so everyone's just sort of hunkered down, and they don't have that confidence. And so I think it's very important for Washington to really send a clear message. Now, right now, and it's an election year, and I think what we'll see, whether it's in the presidential election, or whether it's in my race, or whether it's pretty much any race, we have two competing visions for this nation. And one vision is that we empower the federal government. We make the federal government bigger, we have more bureaucracies, we have more layers of government to do whatever needs to get done in our communities and our state. And the other vision is not that. The other vision is, let's empower individuals. Let's make sure that we get back to the principles upon which this nation was founded. And that is, it's the individual that makes this nation the great nation it is, not the federal government. And the federal government does things least efficiently, least effectively, and most expensively. And the federal government, my oversight in government reform has been such an eye-opener, because because we have hearings over and over and over again. And what you're saying, there is such a detachment from, nobody talks to you about what reform should look like. Nobody goes to the man on the street. And whether it's Dodd-Frank or whether it's the Affordable Care, we got to be talking to the people who are in the trenches. And you get down to Washington and there's these agencies, whether it's HHS or EPA or Department of Labor, they're so detached from how what they're doing down there affects the man on the street, affects that confidence in that individual. And that's the disconnect. That is the disconnect. Washington has gotten so big and so out of touch, and these agencies have this like almost like a self-righteous kind of, we know what's best for all of you. You know, when you have the Department of Labor, we had a whole thing with agriculture. You know, they wanted to not allow kids to work on their family farms. We heard from the farmers, they say, that's how we teach them this business. That's how they learn values. That's how they learn our values. And so, you know, I wrote a letter to Secretary Solis. I said, you got to understand the impact this is going to have on the farmers in my district. And you have to kind of keep bringing them back to, when you pass these things, you may have the best intentions, but you got to understand how they impact the people back at home. And that I think is all of the things in Washington. It's that disconnect. It's that we know what's best, and we got to get this. It's got to be the people that make these decisions, not some bureaucrat who doesn't know what's best for upstate New York. And welcome to Auburn as new superintendent. I think education is a prime example. Auburn knows what's best for Auburn High and New York State and the Auburn schools. New York State, this federal Department of Education down there is mandating, is taxing, it's doing all of these things, it's establishing policies, when New York State and the more power should be given to the local government, to the state government, and take it out of Washington, because they don't know what's good for upstate New York. They don't know, and we had some folks in the office about the whole, and I don't know if it's impacted you yet, about the food, and mandating what the kids can eat, and mandating portion sizes, and the cost, and how it's going to affect the vendors, and how it's going to affect the kids. That's Washington with their values on upstate New York. And it's got to be, the 10th Amendment and states' rights have got to be more respected. And I think we've moved too far away from that right now. And when the federal government gets involved, the rules change. And what happens, I mean, think about education. We pay all this money to the federal government for our school taxes. It gets laundered, it feeds this big bureaucracy down there, and then it comes back to the local school districts with all sorts of strings attached, with all sorts of rules and regulations, with all sorts of mandates. And it just gets so complicated, and it takes the control away from the people, and the people who know best what's for that school district. And that's my concern about making sure that we keep the power with the people and less with the federal government. And I started talking about the two visions, and those are the two visions. I believe that that Declaration of Independence that says we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, among them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Our rights come to us from our Creator, not the federal government, and we've come so far away from that. And if we continue in that path, that Declaration of Independence becomes irrelevant. And that's my concern, that the greatness of this nation, all of the advances we've made has not been because we have a big government that's granting us rights. It's because of individuals. It's because of individuals like my father, who sold MetLife for 63 years, was just always a leader. We had the Mohegan Market. He ran a roller skating rink. He ran the Bel Air Apartments. For a period of time, he had a rink in North Syracuse, so he'd make that trip every day. People who believe what's possible with hard work and a dream and a willingness to work. And what's happened is, and it's because everyone, I think, if you think of it in terms of a ladder, that American dream, climbing up that ladder, everyone is going to, not everyone, but sometimes you slip and you fall. And yes, we need to have safety nets. We need to have safety nets for those who fall. Make sure they have health care, make sure they have unemployment, make sure they have benefits so they can survive. But then our goal should be to get them back on that and keep them going up. Not to make it so comfortable down here in a hammock that they never access the American dream. And those, I believe, are the two different visions for this country. And I will say it again, the greatness of this nation is because of the people